Morning everyone, you join me on this fine Sunday morning, just having a quick coffee before I disappear off to my parents' house. I just wanted to make a quick video because this is the start of a new project for me. For some time now, particularly after watching videos from the likes of Crimson Guitars, I've really fancied giving it a go myself, building a guitar. I'm going into it more or less as a complete novice. I have done a little bit of woodworking before. I have done minor repairs on guitars, the most recent one actually being a snapped headstock on a Les Paul. I glued that back together with some success. So you know, I'm not completely hands off when it comes to guitars, but I've never tried anything like building any parts for them before at all. I've got some plans. I bought them, I think it was Jag Guitars. I'll put the link below. To be honest with you, having watched so many videos and enjoyed them so much watching the videos from Crimson Guitars, I really wanted to buy a set of their plans, but unfortunately they had very limited stock available at the time, so I ended up just going with what was available. I've actually got 2 copies of the plans. The reason for that, I'm thinking the best way to go forward initially would be to make some templates out of MDF. And I think the most accurate way to do that would be, assuming the plans are of course accurate, would be to actually stick one copy of the plans to the MDF and take my time cutting it out so that I've got a nice set of templates both to use with a router and just to size up against the guitar as I make it. The thing that's probably going to hold me back the most to start with is a lack of tools. Knowing that I've wanted to do this for a little while, thankfully one of my relatives for Christmas bought for me a Triton router, which is I think it's the middle one of the 3. It's the more powerful 1/4 inch router, so at least I've got a router already. And I do have some basic woodworking tools, but I don't have any planes or anything like that. So I thought I'd take the camera up to the shed today and just sort of assess what we've got already. I've already got some wood there waiting for me. And I thought we'd just maybe have a little play around and see if we could make any progress today. So the next you'll see will be in the shed. Okay, so here we are in the shed. I apologise for the poor lighting. There's not electricity in here at the moment, but that will be coming soon, so things should improve in the next video or 2. Unfortunately, the MDF that I was going to use to make some templates hasn't arrived yet, and I haven't been to pick any up. So today I thought I would actually take a look at the fretboard and marking that out. So I've got this piece of ebony, which I think came from Exotic Hardwoods UK. There's 2 of them out there with a very similar name, and I bought a little bit of wood from each of them for this build. But yeah, it's just a standard piece of ebony. One thing I noticed is that the ends have come with wax covering both the ends, which I'm told is just to stop it drying out. Good sign that they're sort of taking care of the wood in that way, I guess. If I have a look at it, it's not perfectly straight. It almost is. I think it was probably cut and planed straight, but then it's just maybe shrunk a little bit or twisted as wood does, but it's very, very close. Ideally, I would plane at least one side of this, or put it through a planer thicknesser machine, just to make sure it's absolutely perfect before we started. But one, I don't have a planer thicknesser, or at this exact moment in time a plane. And 2, the thickness of the wood is already quite close to the minimum thickness that I want to go for the fretboard, particularly once we've sanded it down and radiused it and everything. So I think what we'll do today is just kind of clean this up and prep it a little bit. And I've got this paper guitar template which is supposed to map out the fretboard. What I'm going to do is effectively stick this to the wood, get it cut to size, and then mark out where I want each of the individual frets to go. So yeah, that's the plan today. So I'll just reposition the camera and we'll begin taking a look at that. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just try and remove some of the excess wax from the end, because we don't really want that on there. I was tempted to do it with a lighter just by melting it off, but for now I'm going to take one of these razor blades and just scrape off the excess. I am aware, by the way, that making a neck is probably the hardest part of building a guitar from scratch. Normally it would be advisable, I think, for someone trying this kind of thing for the first time to maybe just try carving their own body and then buying a neck in. But I figured I might as well give it a go, and then if it doesn't work out with the neck, I can always buy a neck separately. Trying my best here not to damage to alter the nicely planed edge on the wood. I forgot, by the way, when I was talking in the kitchen, to give a shout out. There's a guy on YouTube, I think he's quite local to me, by the name of Sonic Wingnut. He's been on YouTube a little while doing videos about repairs and sort of doing up cheap guitars and all this kind of thing, who also decided to give this a go. He's got a project that I've been following for a while, but it seems to have stopped. He hasn't uploaded in a while. I hope he's okay. Maybe he's just messed up and doesn't want to continue with it, I don't know, but I hope we get to see how well he's done. It was quite inspiring just to see someone of equal ability just having a go and saying, you know, sod it, let's see what happens, rather than someone who's a professional like the guys at Crimson. I also just wanted to check with the set square as well that, as far as we can tell, this has been cut and planed quite square. As far as I can tell, this side's very straight. This side has a slight bow. So I'm going to mark this side as the straight edge. I think if we know this is the straight edge, I think this corner has the best mitre to it as well. So we've sort of got the sides we trust the best. Now, with this being the fretboard, this is going to taper in anyway, so we're not really too concerned about the edges, but just for when I'm lining up this plan, I'm going to try and do it to these two edges just to get the best starting point, really. So, tools. We have a scalpel and a mini flexible straight edge / ruler. First thing I wanted to do was find the ends of the fretboard and as accurately as possible trim this plan. Okay, I'm starting to see why people buy pre-cut fretboards, but I think that's the best I'm going to get there. So the edges that I believe to already be cut square, I'm actually going to use that as my nut, or my nut end of the fretboard. Then going to line that up as best I can by eye. Doesn't matter too much because at the end of the day we can always take a plane or whatever to the fretboard to sand it. It's just going to be a little bit easier if you've got some kind of point of reference. Yeah, so I have some glue, two types of glue, both spray glue, one temporary and one permanent. I want the paper to stay stuck in place, but it'd be quite nice to be able to easily remove it as well. I think the repositionable adhesive is what we're going to go for. Sure, I'm really going to enjoy getting that sticky stuff off the bench. There we go. Think now might be good time to go make a cup of coffee, let that dry. One cup of coffee. Okay, so I think that's as dry as it needs to be. I can tell that is stuck down. For anyone who's wondering, I would say that is stickier than, say, a post-it, but I can definitely tell that I should just be able to easily peel that back off. Now, I'm quite conscious of the fact that we're rapidly losing light and camera battery, so well, first of all, actually, this isn't the best straight edge in the world. A, because it is a builder's straight edge, and B, because it's bent. But I thought it'd be interesting to just quickly check to see if the measurements on this plan match up with the markings on the straight edge. So in theory this fretboard should be 464 millimeters long. Now if I marry that up, it is telling me that it is 462 millimeters long. Not good. Let me try with something more accurate. Okay, When I'm checking the individual fret spacings along the bottom here with this quite accurate straight edge, they look pretty much bang on. I'm going to take it that the builder's straight edge is probably not too accurate. Obviously it's a little bit worrying, this is quite important. You're not going to notice, I think, if maybe it's out by say 1/10 of a millimetre, but you really don't want to stray too far off scale, otherwise you're going to have all kinds of problems with your instrument and ultimately it's not going to be playable. I think I'm going to persevere, and what I'll do is, if I can get this to a point where I've got some slots cut, I'll take that away and compare it against my existing PRS instrument. I don't know if I mentioned, actually, this is a PRS scale length. The birds on the inlays probably give you a clue. But yeah, we'll get the fret slots cut, and then I'll take it and compare it against my existing PRS. And if it looks okay by eye, then I think we should be okay. If not, then we might be buying another piece of wood. So the plan here, first of all, is just to, as accurately as possible, score out where I want the frets to be. If I cut deep enough with the scalpel blade, it's going to blunt the scalpel blade, but it's also going to give me a groove that I can use to start with the saw. Next I'm going to just also mark out the edge of the fretboard very roughly. Quite good, that glue. It's tougher than I thought. If you apply enough of it, just strong enough, just weak enough that I can pull it off without ripping the paper, but otherwise quite strong. Now, while that's great, one thing does strike me. This fretboard is tapered. There should be a bigger gap here than there is here, and it's the other way around. So, it would suggest I haven't managed to get that perfectly at a right angle. In fact, if I take a set square here, let's have a look. Yeah, so I cannot trust that this edge is straight to these frets. Everything's going to have to be done by eye, which makes life more difficult, but there we go. Yeah. Okay, not a problem. Just makes life a little bit more difficult. Well, since we're going to be doing this by cutting these slots by freehand, effectively, I've already gone over them with a really fine scalpel blade. The next thing I'm going to do is just actually take a slightly thicker craft knife type blade, and go over those same slots to just try and open them up and widen them out just a little bit more. I'm trying to just create the best possible conditions where the saw is not going to slip. So here we go. Okay, so how's that gone so far? Well, as always, when you actually come to do these things in person, you realise that it's very difficult to be accurate when working with limited tools and these kind of materials. I think it's gone okay there. I was actually planning on sort of shaping the edges of the fretboard by hand anyway, so I don't think the fact that we haven't managed to square that up completely is going to be too much of a problem. As long as we're careful, we're just going to have to pay more attention to the actual lines that we've drawn on here when cutting the fret slots, rather than making sure that they're right angled with the edge of the fretboard. It is making life a little bit difficult. I could effectively ignore what I've just done and actually use a mitre to do that, but I'd rather actually concentrate on getting the width between the fret spacings accurate versus getting it square. But let me show you the saw anyway. So this is the saw I bought to do my frets with. Now, certainly on the Crimson Guitars videos and a lot of other videos, I see them using Japanese pull saws. They look really good for the job, but they are very expensive. They're sort of upwards of £40 at least for a saw to do one job. I actually noticed when I was in my local hobby shop, Hobbycraft, that they sold some very similar saws under the name of Rip saws, and I did a little bit of research and I managed to find one which had the right kerf. If you don't know, kerf is sort of the width of the cut that the saw blade actually leaves. I found the one with the right width of cut that would actually cut the fret slots to the right size. I'm sure it's not quite as high quality as some of the Japanese ones, but at the same time I can tell that these are what are being sold on eBay as cheap fret saws when they're quite clearly not. But I think they might be okay for the job, so I'm going to give that a go. Straight away about the saw, well, the blade's nice and sharp, but when I look down the centre, it's not perfectly straight. But I guess you get what you pay for. We'll persevere. I can tell that it's starting to look very gloomy in here. We're rapidly losing light, and I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So what I'm just actually going to do is quickly run down all of these frets with the saw. I'm not intending to cut the full depth. All I'm doing is marking about 1 mil into the material, just to make life a little bit easier when we come to actually cut the full depth of the slots. So I'm going to do that. I'll stop the camera and then we'll head back to the kitchen where it's nice and light. I've got to the end of the fretboard here and it's getting too dark in here to actually be able to see these cuts where the paper's actually come away, so I think I'm going to finish that off at home. So I'll see you guys back in the kitchen. We're back in the kitchen. As you may or may not have noticed, I've just done a rough cut to take the spare end off the fretboard. I've intentionally left it longer than it's supposed to be to allow me to finish the end once I have the neck in place. Now, before we left the shed, there was one fret left to slot, and I've had a go, and unfortunately I've messed it up ever so slightly. The original incision that I made with the scalpel blade followed by the craft knife wasn't quite deep enough, and especially with the saw not being perfectly straight, it's kind of veered off slightly. So what I'm going to do is actually, I haven't cut very deep. I don't think it'll actually be deep enough that once the fretboard's radius that it would even show or be a problem. But I thought I'd take the opportunity anyway, just to try filling that in with dust and glue and see how it goes. The only glue I actually have available at home, because all the rest of it is in the shed, is super glue. Now I'm told that doing this with super glue leaves you with a filler that's slightly darker than the original wood, but given that it's ebony and given that I'm probably going to be sanding it all off anyway, I'm sort of willing to take that risk. So I've got a little bit of greaseproof paper here, and I've got some ebony dust, which I'm just going to try and scrape onto the paper. I'll take about half of it for now. And the idea is going to be to try and mix that into a little bit of a paste and get it into that crack before the glue dries, which will require speed. So here we go. Turns out super glue doesn't generally dry as fast as you think it does. I expected it to harden in seconds. I can already feel it starting to go slightly gelatinous, but still quite workable. Okay, so we'll leave that to dry for a couple of minutes. It's had a few minutes to dry now. Just now going to try and recut that groove where I wanted it. I think that's done the trick. The task is going to be to cut the fret slots to the depth that I want them. Now, this isn't actually the right point in proceedings to do that properly, because the fretboard is ultimately going to have to be radiused, and when it's radiused, that's going to take some thickness off the fretboard, which means that the fret slots will no longer be the original depth. Also, the slots themselves should actually follow the radius of the fretboard, ideally. But what I would like to do anyway is just get the slots in there to the right approximate depth, for a bit of practice more than anything else, to be honest. Now, in order to do that, I need some kind of depth stop on the saw. I've seen this done two ways. One way is to actually get something hard like a file or a piece of wood and actually glue it to the saw. That's really not a bad idea at all. It's probably going to be the most stable, I would imagine. The other option is to get a piece of masking tape or something like that and run that along the edge. I think, considering this isn't actually going to be the final cut, I should be okay with masking tape. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I've had a quick look measuring, this is a piece of fret wire. I've had a quick look measuring the fret wire against the teeth of the blade to see how far up the saw I actually need to go, and to be honest, it's not very far past the actual teeth. So I'm just actually going to try putting a piece of tape on here, and then I'll recompare it with the fret wire just to see if I've got the right depth. So if you're wondering why the tape's not a complete piece, it's because the only roll of masking tape I could lay my hands on quickly was the worst possible roll of masking tape that just breaks and has really sticky glue on it. but at least that sticky glue should keep the tape in place. So let me just compare that. Yeah, so I don't think you're going to be able to see on camera, but that seems bang on, pretty much perfect where it wants to be. As I said, the fretboard's probably going to end up thinner anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. To be fair, being right-handed, I probably should have put the tape on this side, but never mind. So I'm just going to quickly run down these frets with this and try and get them to the depth that I want. So what I've done here, off camera, as if by magic, I got my PRS down to contrast and compare between what we've done and what it should look like. Now, if I put this end up against the nut and compare the closest edge, you can see that everything up to about the 20th fret is within a millimetre, I would say, which I think for a first attempt is perfectly acceptable. I think the 21st and 22nd frets are probably getting on more towards about 2 millimetres out. I mean, to be fair, I never play down there anyway, so it doesn't really bother me that much. I guess intonation problems are probably going to be more noticeable at that end of the neck. But we'll see, we might be able to compensate for it a little bit with the fret crowning and whatnot, but I think for a first attempt that's acceptable. Certainly at this stage in the game, it looks like this fretboard is going to be usable so far. There we go. I think that's it for today. I guess the only thing left to talk about is what have we learned. I think the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is you get what you pay for when it comes to tools. I think when you're cutting out big bits of wood and it doesn't have to be too accurate and you can finish things by hand with sandpaper and things like that, you can maybe afford to cheap out a little bit, but when it comes to fret slotting, that's where you have to be most accurate. And I think the fact that the saw blade wasn't straight really didn't help. Time will tell as to whether these fret slots have actually been cut to the correct width, or whether the wobble in the blade has actually made them a little bit too wide. Overall, I'm pleased with what I've done so far. It's a little bit disappointing that those last two frets look like they might be ever so slightly out, but I'm not. It's a first build. I'm not expecting it to be perfect. If things go terribly wrong, I haven't glued this to anything yet, so there's always the option of sort of trying again or buying a pre-slotted fretboard. Ebony definitely seems like a nice wood to work with. It's very hard, but at the same time the grain's very sort of compact, so it doesn't seem to tear out or behave in a way that you wouldn't expect. So I quite like working with ebony actually. I should have probably had the wood in a vise as well when I was doing the sawing. Even though I was doing it freehand, you could probably see you know, from the video, especially when it's sped up, that the wood was moving around quite a bit. I was making an effort to make sure it didn't move when I was doing the crucial sawing, but it probably would have been better off in a vise. Probably would have been good, as I say, to be in a mitre jig as well. The only problem was, because I opted to use the paper template, the fret slots weren't going to be mitered exactly to the edge of the edge of the fretboard, you know. Ideally, I think for accuracy's sake, people tend to prefer to get the fretboard actually glued to the guitar before they cut the fret slots, just to account for any movement when I clamp it down, because as I said, it's not perfectly flat, but I figured that it was flat enough I could get away with it, and then I can always actually do the fretting once the fretboard is on the guitar itself, assuming that I'm happy with it when it gets to that stage. So yeah, let me know what you think. I'll be trying to document this entire build on this YouTube channel, so if you'd like to see how that goes, please do subscribe. Let me know in the comments below, you know, is there anything you would have done differently? Did you experience the same problems that I did? Have you spotted anything that you think I've done wrong at this stage? I'd be really keen to hear what you have to say, you know. Until next time, goodbye.